Western nations, particularly the United States, are pressuring Russia and issuing economic sanctions to urge President Vladimir Putin to pull out of Ukraine. At the start of December, the Ukrainian president said that the imposed cap on the cost of Russian oil, requiring it not to be sold for more than $60 per barrel, would decimate the Russian economy. However, after the plan had been imposed for over a month, it appears that Russia's losses have been minor and not enough to lead to a change. This has created the thought of finding a solution to the conflict that is more favorable to Russia. In 2 weeks, new restrictions targeting Russia's energy industry will come into effect. The European Union has declared sanctions on Russian oil products and an increase in their price, ending the buying of Russian oil products in Europe. This will have a major effect on the global market, as Europe has been heavily reliant on Russia for its fuel needs. This brings up the question, if Europe stops buying Russian fuel, where will it purchase from? Who will be the suppliers that can fill in Russia's place in Europe and the Russian fuel market? If it does not go to Europe, where will it go? Will Russia stick to its prices or not? And what part will Saudi Arabia and Kuwait play in this story? It is essential to evaluate whether the Western sanctions against Russia are effective. This is an issue we will examine in today's episode. Secretary of State John Kerry declared in November that the sanctions imposed on Russia will compel it to sell some of its oil products at the price determined by the US and its allies. And if this does not occur, Russia would have to reduce its production. On December 5, 2022, the group of 7 major countries and the US agreed on the price cap plan, which prevents any country in the world from buying Russian crude oil at a cost higher than $60 per barrel. This will also mean that no shipping or insurance services will be provided to those buying Russian oil. After the plan was implemented, the Russians, as expected, disagreed with it. President Vladimir Putin stated that Russia will not sell to countries that support the price ceiling plan. Nevertheless, Russia has still stuck to the plan. The buyers have taken advantage of the plan, as reported by the Financial Times. Russian oil was delivered to India in the following weeks, with the price cap plan being enforced through oil transfers that were insured by Western insurance companies. This means that the oil was sold at a price lower than 60% of its value, as it would have been sold for a higher price without the Western insurance companies. This raises the question of whether the price ceiling plan affects Russia and how much it costs them. The Center for Energy and Clean Air tried to answer this question in a report that studied the effects of the first weeks of the price cap plan. The report concluded that the price ceiling plan caused a 12% decrease in Russian crude oil exports and a 23% decrease in Russian crude oil prices in the market. This resulted in Russia losing about 32% of its crude oil revenues in December. The report also states that Russia is losing approximately $172 million a day due to the price cap plan. However, Russia is still earning around $688 million a day from its oil exports, compared to the approximately $1 billion it was making prior to the war. The European Union and the Group of 7 have taken steps to replace the approximately 220 million barrels of jet fuel imported from Russia each year, and have implemented a cap on the prices of Russian oil products. This could cost Russia $129 million a day, significantly less than the $559 million a day currently being spent. Germany is the biggest importer of Russian diesel, buying 604,000 tons of coal from the country. On January 15, 2023, the European Energy Treaty, headed by Germany, declared that alternative sources of Russian fuel had been secured and that Europe could depend on its strategic reserves to lessen the impact of sanctions. The EU has also prohibited the import of Russian fuel commencing on February 5. Kuwait is planning to boost its diesel exports to Europe in 2023 to 50,000 barrels per day due to investments in the Al Zour Dam, one of the biggest oil dams in the world. Additionally, Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates are likely to raise their fuel exports to the continent. Meanwhile, Russia is expected to deliver 2.6 million tons of fuel in January. Even though the European Union has cut ties with Russian fuel, they are still unwilling to completely destroy the Russian oil sector, as its failure could have a global impact on oil prices. The highest rate of fuel exports since the commencement of 2020 was recorded, mostly from Europe, which was trying to acquire as much Russian energy as possible before the sanctions were lifted. Now the question is whether Russia is able to continue to provide oil goods Europe will no longer be purchasing once this month is over. Basically, Russian fuel will be sent to Latin America, Asia, and Africa, a direction similar to where Russian crude exports headed after the sanctions and rate caps were initiated. Which brings us to India, which has recently begun importing a great deal of Russian oil, making it one of their main buyers in the world. Iraq used to be India's major oil provider for a while, however, Russia eventually took over that spot in late 2022. India purchases Russian oil which is cheaper than what is available in Europe and then resells it to Europe as fuel or other items at greater prices. Europeans are aware of this. According to a study published in November 2022, Indian oil organizations, mainly dealing with inexpensive Russian oil, exported to Europe in the post-war period with an average of 730,000 tons of products every month. Bloomberg also mentioned that Turkey can do this, but in a different way. In short, Turkey will buy Russian diesel at a low cost and cover their local market needs, and then take their own diesel, made in Turkey, and sell it to European Union countries at market prices, which is much more expensive than Russian diesel. At the end of the day, if you don't favor Russian diesel, you have the option of buying a different, less expensive variety. This scenario has resulted in some contemplation of the timeline of sanctions placed on Russia with regards to this matter. It is expected that Russia will find a way to utilize their production resources, be it from the oil fields or from the items being discussed, and that would be in everyone's best interests. If this does not take place, energy prices around the world could surge. According to Bank of America, sanctions applied to Russian oil products on February 5 could potentially lead to diesel prices reaching $200 per barrel in the first quarter, which is a substantial increase from the current rate of $128 per barrel. A rise in diesel prices can cause an increase in the cost of everything in the economy, since most of the things we use and hear about are shipped by trucks or trains, which are powered by diesel. The US and its allies considered a ban on the purchase and sale of Russian goods from the products being discussed because similar sanctions targeting the oil of the region did not lead to a reduction in the price of oil that would be detrimental to the market or cause an increase in the price of oil. This suggests that the objective of the sanctions against Russia in February was to put pressure on Russia and the US-led coalition, which is the main Ukrainian ally. Last November, the suggestion to take advantage of Russia's vulnerability and the economic strain it was under in order to engage in negotiations and work out a deal with President Putin to end the hostilities was met with criticism. Both sides were unwilling to do so because of the fear of repeating the experience of the war and the millions of casualties it caused. The Russians refused to comply as they believed the only way to end the conflict was through a complete military victory over Ukraine. On the other hand, Ukraine was receiving little financial help from the US and Europe, and the war's continuation did not promise any security for the future, which is especially worrying for the citizens of Europe who are paying the price for the war in the form of higher energy costs. It is my hope that everyone will eventually understand that politics and diplomacy are the best way to resolve this conflict, as a military solution does not seem to be the best option for either side. If the war in Russia-Ukraine ends in 2023, what will be the result?